Today, I had the privilege of talking to Vicki Reiner. Now, Vicki is a missionary in Brazil with her husband for the last 43 years. They've participated in starting up 6 churches. They had 3 children. The oldest is in Mexico. The youngest is here in the United States. And at the end of 1999, at the age of 15, one of their childs lost their life. They homeschooled their children for several years, and their children also attended mission boarding schools. And at the age of 51, Vicki decided to go back to school and complete her bachelor's degree. And then at age 62, she began to study online through Liberty University, my alma mater, and get her master's degree. She's gone through several life coaching certifications, and she also joined the John Maxwell Team in 2016. She's written a book which will be coming out in the next month or two, and it's written in all English and Portuguese. She's spoken to over 1,500 public high school students in her area in Brazil, as well as to women in churches across that region. This year, she is studying to be a domestic violence advocate with a faith-based organization called Peace Ministries. Without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. Well, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I am here with Vicki Reiner, who is a Baptist missionary who is working in Brazil and is also a member of the John Maxwell leadership team. And Vicki has a wealth of knowledge and experience. I've asked her to come on here because she has demonstrated that idea that we've been talking about with all of our guests called true success. Vicki, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and what you have going on, and we'll dive into the interview.
Okay, good, Kirby. It's good to be here. My name is Vicki Reiner, and I've been in Brazil for many years as a missionary with my husband. I've been with the John Maxwell Team since 2016, and I also am working as a life coach. We live in Petrolina, Pernambuco, Brazil, which is in the northeast, just over the line from the state of Bahia, which is the biggest state in Brazil. And we have been working in several towns here in the area. We have started 6 churches, and you might be interested in knowing what's going on here in regard to COVID. Our town has 349,000, and the city across the river is called Juazeiro, and it has 215,000. So compare that to St. Louis, which is 320,000. So we have had 493 confirmed cases of COVID in our town and 15 deaths. And across the river, they've had 331 confirmed and 4 deaths. So we are in the second cycle of the COVID flu. And our towns have panicked because we've started this new cycle. And so they had started opening up everything, and now we're closed again. So we're in quarantine for another couple weeks, which is okay. My work doesn't change too much because we're dealing with the individuals in our churches, and we're online with our services, and my coaching clients I can deal with online as well. So my life hasn't changed a whole lot with the COVID situation, except like going to the grocery store, and I don't go out as much, and I need to get my hair done really bad, but we live with it, and we're all looking this way. So right now I'm working on a book. I'm going to be a published author before long, and this book is called, right now the title is Hope is More, and I don't expect that to change, but it could change once I get it out there and compare it with other books that are available. I've had a lot of challenge writing this book. I wanted, at first, I tried to keep it kind of a broad audience, and save my spiritual side for later in the book. But I couldn't help myself. I just had to bring it in here and there. So it's woven all throughout the book, my story, and it's got a lot of pieces from my story in it. So I wrote it to encourage people. And I know we're coming out of a situation worldwide where we need some extra focus on things, and to find the hope that we seem to have lost sight of. A month ago, I started doing some mini masterminds on live Facebook, and I'm enjoying that. These are new things to me. The technical side. This is all new to me. This is my first interview online, and really excited about being able to do this with you. I do individual coaching sessions online and in person. Anywhere in the world, we can make arrangements to do that, and I love doing that. And so that's about me. I do have a husband, and we've raised 3 children.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. It's fantastic, and updating us on everything that's going on. So if, you're listening to this, we recorded this on June 20th. So when you hear those numbers, you can actually probably go back and compare those numbers to where they're at right now. So when this goes actually live here in the next week or two. So, that's awesome, Vicki. So you've gone on this incredible journey. You're working on this book, you're coaching, you're part of the John Maxwell team, you're in Brazil, you're a missionary, you've helped, start up, or be a part of these 6 churches. You're doing all kinds of incredible things already. So let's go back to the beginning. Where was it that you grew up, and what was that like?
Well, I was born in Kansas. And we had to move when I was a 3rd grader. We had to move because my oldest brother was a chronic asthmatic, and he needed to get to a dry climate. So we moved to the plains of Colorado, and we lived in the Denver, Inglewood area for the rest of my years at home. However, we moved a lot. We moved almost every year. And my parents didn't discuss things with us kids, but it was financial. It was a financial struggle. My dad had a good job, which he eventually lost and had to get other work. And so every year it was like hand to mouth, it was. But as a kid, I don't remember suffering. I know I can tell you that we ate a lot of chicken and a lot of canned peas, and we didn't have very many desserts, and we hardly ever went out to eat. My daddy would go to the McDonald's once in a while, and I remember him bringing home a couple bags of quarter hamburgers for us kids. So that's how old I am. Back to the quarter hamburger. And but in school, there were things like we didn't get new clothes very often, and we wore our clothes until they were worn out. My shoes I got twice a year, once for the beginning of school and once when Easter came around and Mom wanted to dress us up. So that was different, and depending on your economical level, that's where you landed with the kids as well. Because the kids who could afford, whose parents could afford things, they didn't want to be with you. So it was a struggle. We didn't always move from school district to school district, but when we did, it was horrifying because didn't have friends, and had to start over again. But I think that helped me to build resilience, because coming to Brazil, I didn't have friends, and I still don't quite fit in, but I have friends. I have friends who will walk beside me. They're not embarrassed. So so I think that the things I went through as a child made me more resilient.
Oh, wow. And so, speaking of that, you're talking about, the things that you went through as a child, and I can see how the lifestyle that, you grew up with, is different today than most kids in America. I mean, for some kids, it's still the reality of their lifestyle, but we've improved so much since then. But you were talking about, you wore clothes until they got worn out, and, they only got a couple pairs of shoes. I remember my grandfather telling me that he had 14 brothers and sisters. And so he remember him telling me about that they used to share shoes. And so they would run around on the farm barefooted, but then whoever went to town, they would swap shoes out. So they would say, okay, well, you're going to town, so you get the shoes. And then when you get back, they basically gave the shoes back. So they were just constantly, shifting the shoes and stuff. So it was interesting to hear him talk about that. And so that's, when you were talking about that, that reminded me of that story that he once told me. But, the kids today, they have designer clothes and designer this and designer that. And it might be buy, $200, $300, $400, shoes. And life's a lot different than it was compared to back then. But when you think about that, when you were growing up, what did you think that life would be like when you got older? Did you imagine it would be like this, or, how is it different than what you imagined?
Well, we came through the Vietnam War. That was ending when I became a teenager, and we lost friends in that war. And so many of us, many in my age group, including me, we didn't see the future. We couldn't see the future. We didn't think that we were going to have a future. And many of us came out of that with the idea of, why bring children into this world, into that kind of situation, It was a very sad time. It was there were a lot of protests against that war. And we went on to school. A lot of us didn't know what our future would be, so we didn't know how to prepare for it. We weren't ready for it. And our parents didn't know how to advise us, into what to do. And many of them were ill prepared, to advise us. When you raise a family, excuse me a sec. When you raise a family, it's all experimental. Very, very few people study family when they go to college. And so you do a lot of trial by error. And I think it's a wonder that our first children even survive. But they do, and so our parents based raising us on how they were raised and how they didn't want to raise us because of how they were raised. And then we came out of that era too, with that kind of thinking. I want my children to have a better life than I do, and so I will do the best I can to make sure that they get it. And so everybody's looking at the dollar sign, about how do we go about getting that for our children, so our children can have a better life, not realizing that what they really need is us. And that's what I needed. I needed my parents.
It's really important. That's a very, very important thought right there. So, you're currently in Brazil right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. So it's interesting. And I don't want to say that you're disconnected from the United States, but you're probably very aware of what's going on in the country right now with COVID-19, social justice movements and things like that. So, and with police reform. So we're at a crossroads right now in our nation. And back then you have that experience where you saw the anti-war movement, the resentment and things like that, and we've become very progressive since then. I mean, we've moved a long way since then, but you can kind of go back and take a look and say, we're kind of at the same crossroads again in our nation's history based off of what we were, what are your thoughts and ideas about that? And, as far as, a person who's like, on the John Maxwell team, so you do a lot with leadership, what are your thoughts about how to help us move forward to, a united, direction to where we're all moving in the same direction rather than apart?
Well, let me talk about my marriage a little bit. Okay, because I think that might give us a few thoughts in regard to what should be done. I used to believe that my relationship with my husband should be the primary one, and that that he should always be first in my life. And we tend to, you know, because we're so close to each other and we spend so much time, you know, seeing each other and relating to each other or not relating to each other. We know each other better than anybody else. And because of that, we see each other's flaws. So neither one of us came into this relationship as perfect. And neither one of us had perfect role models. Neither one of us mature at the same time. And we're coming up on 70, both of us. So with time, we've grown, and growth means change. So some of the changes you don't really appreciate that you see. And some of the changes are not good for us as a couple. Or it could be that the changes that you see, you know, in society are not necessarily good for for you know, relating to other people or relating to other countries. So it took me a very long time to realize that my primary attention should not be my husband. It needed to be my work on myself and God. The marital relationship is not a matter of a plan or a list of numbered items to get through. It's not a recipe for getting what you want. He's a person, he's his own person, and I'm my own person. And we have had a hard time finding unity in our relationship. And I'm sure this is true of many, many people, that in their primary relationships, they, you know, it's not easy to find common ground and to find unity. But it doesn't mean that you neglect your responsibilities as the husband or as the wife or as the parent. It means, though, that you live righteously, you practice kindness, and you respect each other and other people. It also means that sometimes the best love that you can offer to someone else, to your partner, or to someone that you know, is to let them see that his or her actions is detrimental. Their behavior is detrimental. And so you have to kind of step aside and watch it play through. So you don't do that by reacting or overreacting to what they're doing or what they're saying. You do that by controlling your own emotions and having a controlled response to the behavior that you're seeing. And this is true in every relationship, not just husbands and wives. It's true in our society that we need to take care of ourselves. We need to control our emotions, and we need to control our response to how other people are behaving. And it, you know, it doesn't mean responding in the same way that they're coming across. So in my own relationship with my husband, he loves his work and he loves his ministries, and he spends a lot of time doing those things and spending a lot of time with his friends, with people in the church, and he has influenced a lot of people. So we don't have the oneness that I would like to see. But we're each responsible for our own lives, and we must do the work on ourselves. That's what we're responsible for before God, is our own life, our own reactions, our own behavior. So if there's to be a unity, then both sides have to work on it equally. So in my relationship with my husband nowadays, we have come to terms pretty much where he does his thing, I do my thing, and we're growing ourselves, you know, and there's peace at home. So in society, that's what I hope to see, you know, is that we're taking care of our own spiritual lives. We're taking care of our own behavior. We're learning to control our emotions, and we're not responding in like kind. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's an extremely powerful message, you know, and working on yourself and really it's growing together, you know, through that process. I love what you said. I mean, it speaks to me of a level of maturity that I think some of us need to get to at some point, you know, and you have that self-awareness and that recognition. And you have those personal experiences, which has brought you through that level of maturity as well. I've recently, you know, and the reason why I say that is I recently read a book called Maturity through a Christian's men's group. And the one of the more profound statements in there, it talks about through patience and endurance, you can find strength. And that said a lot to me about, you know, when I think of maturity, I think of patience and endurance equals strength. And so I'm hoping to see, you know, more of that in the years to come. And, you know, we're all going to go through these ups and downs through our economy and our systems and, you know, everything else. And, you know, we'll learn new things and we'll progress forward. And, you know, like I said earlier, much further along than we were 50, 60, 70 years ago. And the conditions are much, much better. But there's one thing in there that you said that I really latched onto, and you said that you worked on yourself and your faith. And so in your personal bio and background, you said there, and you actually told me that you went back to school at age 51 to get your bachelor's degree. And then again, you went back at 62 to Liberty University to work on your master's degree. You know, that's an incredible feat. And that's probably something that very few people are willing to do. But that goes back to saying that you are willing to work on yourself, you know, and focus on those things so you could grow to become a better person and, you know, become more value to the world around you. So you want to kind of talk about that, just kind of the story and how that went about?
Well, first of all, you know, I said that we have 3 children, and our oldest one lives in Mexico, and our youngest one lives in the U.S. And our middle son, we lost him at age 15, and that was the end of '99. So he didn't see the new millennium. And when I was bringing him up, when he was young, he was very advanced for his age. And I had challenged myself. I homeschooled for 8 years. And when I homeschooled him, he was always ahead of me. He would say things like, you know, Mom, we studied that yesterday, you know, or here, let me teach you that, you know. And so, or he would want to set up his own curriculum. And I let him do as much as possible. But when he died, I didn't have to be concerned anymore about his education. That's when I started looking at mine. And the year I went back for my bachelor's degree, that was the year he would have started college. And so it was a great feat for me. It was a conquest that to be able to do that as if I were helping him and invested in him. You know, I was investing in myself. So part of that drive came from his elevation to heaven. So so I went back and I got that, and I had to change my degree because it was in a different school. And I had to do, my husband told me I had to do it in the 9 months that we were in the States. So I actually did 2 years of study in 9 months. And it was very, very intense. But it was a good example to my daughter who was still in high school. And one morning I remember she had to help me put my backpack on. It was winter and I had to traipse through the snow to get to school. And she had to put my backpack on me because with my coat and everything, I couldn't do it. So she put my backpack on me and shoved me out the door. So it was kind of a reversal there. And so then I started, after I finished that was a bachelor's in management. I just kept asking the Lord, so what do you want me to do now? What's next? And he reminded me of what my strengths are. And I am very, very good at helping people think things through. And I'm really good at one-on-one conversations. So I just kept thinking about counseling. So that's what I went to Liberty for. And halfway through, they told me that I knew that I would have to go for one summer school, but they told me I would have to go for two. And we just couldn't confirm that I could do that. So Liberty actually changed, they made up a new degree for me so that I didn't lose any of my courses, and added on to that were the social things that, I know you took you got the same degree. So you know what I'm talking about, which actually it turned out to help me better, because what I do for a client in coaching is I help them to find their way. And I need to sometimes research to get more information in order to help them specifically for what they're looking for. And so that degree helped me a great deal in regard to that. And I am very, very pleased that I didn't continue in the counseling degree, which would have taken me in a different direction. So
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, and it's kind of interesting that we both ended up having to have taken the same degree program and gone to the same alumni. So we're both graduates of Liberty's master's program in counseling. So it's pretty interesting that transpired. So, speaking of, you were talking about, working with, people one-on-one, and, you talked about, a little bit about your missionary work in Brazil, but you've spoken to about 1,500 students in Brazil. What's the message that you deliver? What's the work that you're doing there? And how are you helping the people of that country, better themselves? And what's the mission about as far as you? Because I think every one of us has a personal mission, and I think we share that common thing in faith. We feel like we're all have a calling, and we're all here to serve a particular purpose. And so, what is that for you?
Wow, you take me deep. Some of the questions you presented to me, I haven't really thought about, but I have a longing to help people that are oppressed, people that are who don't have a voice, and I run into a lot of those everywhere I go, in the U.S. too. When we're in the U.S., there are a lot of people who don't have a voice, and part of their difficulty is that they don't know how to use their voice. They run into walls and people who are stronger than they are, and so they don't know how to express themselves and how to move forward in that regard. And this is all about. This is what the John Maxwell Team does. They help people find their voice in leadership. And leadership is just influencing other people. We've learned that from John Maxwell. It simply means if you want to be a leader, what you're longing for is to influence other people. And the message that I'm taking to these young people is that they are the messenger, that they can influence other people for good. But they have to apply it to their own lives personally first in order to find their voice and be able to speak it. Because without experience, they won't find their voice.
Yeah, I agree. There's a thing about stories, and when I was, again, we'll go back to Liberty. When we were doing our narrative, not narrative, but
studies, and you would have to pick a particular topic and write a 12-page paper about by the end of the course. And one of the things that I selected was narrative therapy. I don't know if you're very familiar with that, but that's Michael White out of Australia created this therapy, and it helped a lot of people through some challenging things, especially people who had 2 different types of disabilities and were being bullied, and they just had zero self-worth at the time, and they helped them walk through their stories and made them, based off of the exploration of their story, rather than looking at it as a negative, they looked at it as a positive. And it's like a lot like post-traumatic stress growth. You grew from your personal experience, and it made you stronger and more resilient and even more powerful person, and it allowed people to tell their story in a way. And so instead of letting everybody else tell your story and you retell that story that everybody else is telling you, you tell it in your own fashion and form, to where you emerge as the hero of the story, which basically empowers you. And it's an incredible therapy that I studied. I use some of the techniques, a little bit this and that. I mean, I'm not a practitioner, so I don't really dive deep into the therapy, but I found there's some very applicable ideologies and uses of it. And so what you're saying, talking about experiences and helping people understand, their story brand and who they are, a lot of this stuff is really, really similar in a way. And I think, our experiences and stories are very powerful, and, it helps us kind of emerge as the leader that we are. It's very hard to change who we are, because we have those thoughts and feelings and values, and those things can change over time. I'm sure after a traumatic incident, like, losing, your 15-year-old son, your values changed a little bit. You had a shift in, your way of thinking. And that happened to me when I lost my grandfather. He was my big mentor of mine. And so my thinking and my level of maturity and the direction in life that I was headed kind of began to shift because of that event. And, I think that these events happen on purpose. There are reasons why we get shifted, and they have meaning and purpose for us also. I appreciate you sharing all that with us, and we're closing down here towards the end of our conversation. But the one thing I would like to ask you is there one thing that you need to do now that still scares you that you haven't done yet?
Well, speaking always throws me for a loop. Mm-hmm. Speaking in front of groups, and I'm working on that. I'm an introvert, believe it or not. I have gotten very good at hiding that in certain situations. However, speaking is difficult for me, and I just have to keep doing it more. I have to keep exposing myself, making myself vulnerable in front of a group. Mm-hmm. In one of my Facebook Lives, I mentioned that I talked about my first speaking engagement after I became a John Maxwell Team member, mm-hmm. and it bombed. It was not good. And I was embarrassed, but I learned a lot from that experience. I learned that I have to talk about what I've been through. Mm-hmm. What I say gets its power from my life. Mm. And so I have to talk about my life. And that's exposing yourself. That's making yourself vulnerable to others. So, I'm practicing that. I'm doing that. And so that's scary. That's very scary. I'd like to do a little bit more travel. Mm-hmm. And that may come with speaking engagements. We'll see. So,
no, that's awesome. Really, I appreciate you sharing all that with us. It's fantastic. I know the fear of public speaking tends to be the number one fear, and it's usually something that people fear more than death. So I don't get that too much, but that is how it ranks. It tends to be the number one fear of the world.
Yes.
behind deaf, and I don't really understand that. But I had the same fear of public speaking, and that's why I ended up joining Toastmasters International, even after I've gone on and done plenty of trainings and speakings in front of lots of people, to include people at the Pentagon. I'd still get up there and be nervous. Even a couple of days before, I could start to feel the nerves start to set in, and and getting up there right before, and you're breathing hard and your palms are sweaty, and but Toastmasters International was a great organization that actually helped me overcome some of those challenges. And that's why I like to ask about fears, because once we overcome our fears, we learn through that growth and those experiences, and, we create more stories, and we have more depth and more character and more resilience. And so that's
Yes.
why I asked that question. It's awesome. I love your answer. And it makes me reflect on my own personal experiences. So with the missionary and this, you're also working, you're doing some study with some domestic violence advocacy in your book.
Yes.
So, where are we going to see you in the future, and what are you hoping, to achieve through all this? What is that?
Well, um, I have thought a lot recently about a comment that when I went to the training for John Maxwell,
Mm-hmm.
I met a man there from I think he was from Finland, and he asked me um, first he made the comment, there are a lot of young women who need a mother,
Mm-hmm.
and then he asked me, what about you being their mother? What about you helping these young women? And I don't actually know how to advertise that.
Mm-hmm.
Would you hire me to be your mother? my
That's
children had
interesting.
a my children had a book called Are You My Mother? I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you're familiar with that one,
Yeah.
but we used to read that over and over. And I want so much to help young career women to recognize that they don't have to do all of it.
Mm-hmm.
They can choose what they're going to focus on, that they don't have to do what everyone around them is expecting of them, that they need to listen to their heart, and they need to focus on what they were put here to do, not on what everybody else expects them to do. And I have a strong pull in that direction to help these young women. And so I expect to be going in that direction.
Mm. Yeah, I think what you're doing is extremely powerful, because you have the experiences, right, that you can share with them and help them with. You've had your own personal tragedies that you've gone through. You've gone back to school, later in life, to achieve the things you want to do. You've traveled, you've embrace different cultures, and again, you're working with the study of domestic violence and advocacy. You've spoken to students. I think that's very powerful, because we do something very similar here as well, or at least I do. And I've grew up without a father. I don't know who my biological father was. And so when you say to be a mother to other women, I think I think that's vastly important. I also realize that there's a lot of boys in this country that don't grow up without a father. And so I'm not trying to be their father, but at least be a mentor, a healthy, very supportive role model for them. That way they can look to you and say, okay, this is a person that, there's have attributes or characteristics that I would like to attain. And, I would like to have that experience. And, you can be that mentor, you can be that role model, you can be that person in their life for them, whether it be a coach or whatever form of relationship that you want to develop. And I think it's important. A statistic I ran across, and it might be interesting to get your take on it as well, is about 66% of the silent generation, the men grew up in the homes of those children. And then when it got to the boomer generation, it was about 44 to 46%. And then the generation X, my generation, was it was about 41 to 43% of the men actually lived in the home with the children in the family. And then, now the millennials, they're about to turn 30. The oldest up will turn 39 this year, and only 34% of the men actually live in the home. So I see very challenging, breakdown of, the family unit. And we start to see this slide over time, over generations and over generations. And I think it's important that people like us, are a part of these folks' lives that, want to continue to demonstrate those family values or attributes, and to pour into the younger generations and help them, see and understand, what it's like to have these value-based, systems and beliefs. And I think that's largely missing today in society. If you look at most of the major societal ills across our country, and a lot of them, the common factor is fatherlessness. It's 80% of the men that are in prison grew up without a father. Same thing with teen pregnancy, domestic violence, which you're a part of. A lot of these people that are doing these things have grown up without fathers in the homes. Even the mass shootings in the world, most of those, the common characteristic is the kid grew up without a father. And so I look at that and I see a root cause or an underlying problem that we probably need to get back to and try and resolve. So I applaud you for, stepping out there, because I know there are the same thing that happens, girls need mothers as well. And I don't maybe know the statistical data on there, but I'm sure it's just as much of a problem as it is for boys as well. Because if, 1/3 of the boys grow up in homes without fathers, I kind of wonder, I've seen other men that have been single parents that have raised, their children, without a mother. And, that can be very challenging for a little girl as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, that's interesting. I appreciate you. So when, let's jump into the next question I have is how do you define true success?
Oh, well, I'm going to talk about success for me
Mm-hmm.
and what it means to me. That's, I used to think that there was no possibility that I would ever be successful because I didn't think I had resources at hand. So most of my life I had great ideas, but didn't know specifically what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized early on in my marriage that most of the things that were going on with me were not things that I chose.
Mm-hmm.
I was taking care of my marriage. I was taking care of my children. I didn't have time to do anything more than ministry. I barely had time for that because of the high responsibilities at home. So my life pretty much became dictated for me, and it was a matter of surviving from one day to the next. So I tried to conform to what I heard others saying to me, and that was to be content where you are, to accept your circumstances and be happy. And that didn't work out very well. You can put on a smiley face, you can do a lot of pretending, but for you actually to be loving every bit of it with your heart, when you know that God wants you to do something else besides this, it was difficult to keep putting on the happy face. And so I was very discontent. But recently, I was told by one of our trainers on the John Maxwell Team that discontent can be a sign of a need for change. And discontent can guide you to a higher level of consciousness, where you have more potential than you have now, and where you can actually live out your purpose. So I started asking God about that. Is it unreasonable for me to want to do something else? Is it unreasonable for me to pursue feeling good about myself and being fulfilled in life? Is that unreasonable? And it took a long time but that's, that was part of what led me into going back to school, was to progress into making choices for myself and doing what I believe God wants me to do. So as I read it now, success for me is doing one thing at a time and having victory in that area. And when I do that, it leads me to other things and more success. And when I reach that, I'm not done. I have other things to do. So for me, what has actually been the secret to my success, I suppose you could say it that way, is that I am determined and I am persistent to do something outside of my comfort zone every single day. I know who I am. I know I'm here for a reason, and I know that reason. And so I do that. I be that. And then every day I have a victory, and every day I reach success.
Well, that's incredible. So basically, I mean, I'm going to try and sum it up here is that, you do one thing at a time until you achieve success or even potentially mastery, and you do well in that area. And then you look for the opportunities that are going to present themselves once you've reached that level to get to the next level, and then continue to focus on singularly or in one direction until you get to there's always another level, and you're always leapfrogging from one to the next. So that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's true.
That.
But there is one thing, Kirby, that there is one thing that I want to clarify, and that is that sometimes what I'm reaching for is not necessarily what I should be reaching for, but it takes me to finding out what it is that I should be reaching for.
Yeah, there was something somebody said to me recently, and it really resonated with me. I always thought about, getting to a particular destination in life, and having that strategic focus. And I begin to shift my ideology a little bit more to having a direction, being very directional versus very pointed. And one of the things they said, has been resonating with me a lot more, and I've been kind of focusing on me personally, is like the process. It's all about the process. It's all about, that you got to fall in love with the process and not necessarily going from one moment to the next, but the process. It's not about the result. And so, and I keep saying process because it's like you have to love the process. It's not always about, because you're not always going to get the result that you desire, but it's who you become through the process. And so I just thought that was incredibly powerful, and you reminded me of that. So now Mother Teresa has been oftenly quoted, and many other people in history, of saying something very similar to, if you cast a stone in the water, you'll create a ripple effect. And so if we see ourselves as that particular stone, or in the world is the water, like how are we going to create a ripple effect that maybe resonates with our community, our society, or even generations, to come? What will be your ripple effect?
Well, I know what I get satisfaction from. I know that it encourages me greatly to see the effect I have on someone else in a positive way, not in a negative way. And so what I think is happening with me in regard to rippling outward is that people have seen a change in me that affects them and gives them permission to step out of where they're stuck. And I know this has happened with many of my clients. When I have been able to show them their value this light goes on in their head, and they grow from that experience of getting to know who they are and what their reason for being is. So I could not have transmitted that idea even to them if I hadn't have had that experience in my own life. So because of that experience in my own life, I can reach someone else and help them to have their own experience in finding out who they are and why they're here. And that's the ripple effect. Because then they'll take it to someone else. And I've had new clients because of that. They'll bring somebody to me, do this for her too. Or, tell my classmates this in the high school. And so I think that is a tremendous influence on the generations. And I think this is one of the things that I wanted to see, that I'm already seeing, is that just because I'm an old woman doesn't mean that I can't reach the new generations.
Yeah.
And I am so grateful for that. I have something to tell them that they will listen to, that they are listening to. And I'm really grateful for that. Vicki Reiner is not going out of style.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. You put the youth into your wisdom, so that's very awesome. And I think it's important for us, to be able to pour into them, and we can still connect with them. There's a lot. The technology might be a little different. There may be different things about each generation, but we all can there's a way to connect with everybody, and it's just trying to find that way to connect and resonate with people. That's very powerful. One thing you said, I thought is amazing, and something a mentor of mine is doing with his group of people that he mentors right now. And when I first met him several months ago, he's one of my newer mentors, but we had a second and third session recently. But he's like, hey, there's a part of this. He goes, I don't want anything from you out of this. He's like, the only thing I want from you, and mentoring me, and stuff like that, is that you impart what I give you to other people. And he's like, I want you. So he has this group of people, and he connects us all together, and he expects us to engage and help each other out. So the more senior mentees he's had, his expectation is that you guys are going to connect and you're going to talk about it. And so now you're doing some peer stuff on top of his mentoring. And so he's creating this tribe of people. He's like, that's all I want you to do. And so when the next person comes along, I'm going to call on you, and I'm going to expect you to be that senior peer mentee. And so help walk them through and have discussions and tell your stories and do those things that you need to do in order to develop as a human being and person as well. And so it sounds like you're doing something very similar to that, where, that person that you work with passes it on to the next person, and then they come into your lane, and then you're able to kind of, help and grow more people and have that impact or that compound effect, that ripple effect. So very cool. So Vicki, I love the conversation today. We've actually gone a lot longer, than we expected, because it's been that great of a conversation. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on here and being a part of this, and, sharing your message and your voice with the rest of the world, because obviously this is as access as soon as we hit publish to the entire world. So tell us, one last thing, maybe one last piece of advice or one last message, and then how we can get a hold of you.
Okay, one last message. Well, the subject of my book, hope is more. It's always present. You just have to recognize it. It's there. And you can reach me through Facebook. Right now, I don't have a website. I decided to make a new one, and it's taking me a while. So you can search me on Google, search out Vicki Reiner Coaching, or Focused on Purpose, and you'll find me on Facebook. There are other Vicki Reiners out there. I am not them. I am the one that is a coach.
Awesome, Vicki. I appreciate it. And I will actually drop all the links to everything you've talked about so far in the show description. So if you go to anchor.fm and find the show, they'll be able to click on the links and be able to, connect with you that way. So again, thank you again, deeply from the bottom of my heart, for sharing your story, sharing your message, and making us all a little bit better today.
Thank you, Kirby.
All right.
Have a
See you
great
soon.
day.